Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. Welcome to another of my top 10 lists. Well, today's top 10 list, I am actually focusing on my top 10 favourite alternative 1980s movies. What does that mean, alternative 1980s movies? Well, I talked about this briefly in a recent review I did, and I believe it was for The Hitcher. There is, if you ask somebody, certainly from my generation, but a lot of people, name me your favourite films from the 1980s. They'll all reel off things like, your Raiders of the Lost Ark, Empire Strikes Back, E.T., Aliens, Predator, Running Man. You'll get all these things reeled off, and they're all what you would expect someone to say. They're the ones that come to mind immediately in regards to 1980s movies. Your Die Hard, your Lethal Weapons, it goes on and on and on. And that makes sense. Those are all great films. But then, when you think about it for a second and you think, and you dig a little bit deeper and you have a second thought, what movies generally come to mind? And that's what this list is going to focus on. These are all fantastic 1980s movies. But when you ask somebody what their favourite films from the 1980s are, a lot of people don't immediately mention these, and then when they give it a little bit more thought, they'll be like, do that film, now that was brilliant as well. And that's after they've reeled off 10 or 15 other films from the 1980s that they really love. So that's what I really wanted to focus on with this list. And also I've got a whole array of other lists that I'm working on over coming weeks. I've had a few good ideas for top 10 lists in the coming weeks. Some of them have been suggested by others. Some of them I've seen on other people's channels. Some of them that I've been working on for a few weeks myself. So stay tuned for lots more, but I do hope you enjoyed this list. As always, there are some honourable mentions that I want to try and talk about, and there's three here in particular. The first one is the Rutger Hauer film Wanted, Dead or Alive. This was a staple in my household growing up. I'm a big fan of Rutger Hauer. I have been for many, many years, and this film is a really excellent film. And it's actually based on, I think it's a Steve McQueen. Was it a film or TV show from the 60s or something like that? And he plays basically a bounty hunter that has to hunt down Gene Simmons from Kiss, who is a terrorist. It's fantastic. The next one is Uncommon Valor. This is an 80s action film. It's got a great cast. It's got Gene Hackman and Patrick Swayze about these ex-Vietnam veterans going back into Vietnam to try and find some missing vets. And the third one is a film called Best of the Best. It's a martial arts drama. Eric Roberts, James Earl Jones, about these American martial artists that are trained up to enter this competition to fly the flag for the US. It's a really fantastic film, and it led on to a whole array of sequels too. None of them as good as the original, but the original is certainly worth checking out if you're a fan of martial arts films. So coming in at number 10 is a film called An Innocent Man. This stars Tom Selleck. It was released in 1989, and it's a prison drama, and it focuses on Tom Selleck's character, who is a normal guy. He's living happily with his wife, and then he basically gets burst in on by the police. They think he's a drug dealer. They actually go to the wrong house, but because they don't want to get in trouble, they frame him for being a drug dealer. He ends up getting sent to prison for a number of years. He ends up toughening up in prison. He has no choice. And then when he finally gets out of prison, he tries to turn the tables on the corrupt cops that sent him there in the first place. It's a really fantastic film that you should check out. Coming in at number 9, again released in 1989, this one is a film called Warlock. Julian Sands, Richard E. Grant, Laurie Singer. Fantastic action horror, this film. Julian Sands plays this really powerful and evil warlock that travels through time into the present day to cause chaos. Richard E. Grant is a witch hunter from the 16th century or something like that, who comes through the portal as well to try and track him down. It's a really good film. There's some fun effects in there, and it's a really good chase film. Richard E. Grant makes an interesting action lead here, but he pulls off the role really, really well, and Julian Sands is suitably sinister in the role too. Coming in at number 8 is a film called Deadly Pursuit. I think it's under a different name, maybe in the US, but I certainly know it as a film called Deadly Pursuit. Released in 1988, Tom Berenger, Sidney Poitier, Clancy Brown, and Sidney Poitier plays like an FBI guy who's chasing down a serial killer. He ends up tracking him to, I think it's the Canadian mountains or something like that. And he's got to go over these mountains to try and track him down, and he needs the help of Tom Berenger, who's like a mountain man that knows the area really well. And his girlfriend, Kirstie Alley, is leading some people through the mountains, and they're giving chase to try and track them down before the serial killer makes a move. It's a wonderful film with great chemistry between the leads. Coming in at number 7 is a film called Enemy Mine. It was released in 1985. I think Wolfgang Petersen, directed this. Fantastic director. Great cast. Lou Gossett Jr., Dennis Quaid, about these enemies, basically, that crash land on this planet. They get left there for a number of years, and they have to survive together. They end up becoming the best of friends, and they get into all sorts of different issues and adventures, life and death situations, and you see this bond grow between these two characters. It's a really great story. It's a science fiction film that I don't think gets anywhere near enough recognition, and if you haven't seen it, you definitely need to. Coming in at number 6 is Iron Eagle. Released in 1986, we have Jason Gedrick and again Lou Gossett Jr. Now this film obviously came on the success of Top Gun. Many people actually prefer this to Top Gun, and I'm actually one of those people. It's really cheesy, but it's basically about a teenage boy who's a very skilled pilot. His father gets shot down in the Middle East, and David Suchet plays this evil Middle East character. They've got his father in a prison cell, and Jason Gedrick and Lou Gossett Jr. put this plan together to go over there and break him out of prison using just fighter jets. It's cheesy as hell, but great fun. Coming in at number 5, a film called Running Scared. Billy Crystal is in this one, Gregory Hines, and it's like an action comedy. It sounds like it wouldn't be any good, this film, but honest, trust me, you really have to watch this one. About these two cops basically tracking down this drug dealer on the streets of, I think it's Chicago. The chemistry here between Gregory Hines and Billy Crystal is amongst the best you will ever see on screen, of these cops. Wisecracking cops trying to get these drugs off the street. It's funny. It's got a great soundtrack. It's such a well-told story with some great action, with some unconventional action leads in it. And it's an 80s film that I promise you will enjoy if you try it. Coming in at number 4, released in 1989, one of my favourite comedies of all time, and it is a film called Major League. Great cast: Tom Berenger, Charlie Sheen, Corbin Burnson, about this faltering baseball team, the Cleveland Indians. Now, when I first watched this film in the 80s, I didn't even know that the Cleveland Indians was a real team. And I learned much later on that it is, in fact, a real team. And I fell in love with it even more because knowing that. It's about these screw-up baseball stars coming good, basically. It's a great underdog story, great soundtrack, and it's very, very funny. Coming in at number 3 is Stakeout, released in 1987. I've got a smile on my face talking about this film because I can watch this film endlessly. Richard Dreyfuss, Emilio Estevez, about these two cops having to stake out this woman's apartment, who is an ex-girlfriend of an escaped convict. Richard Dreyfuss essentially falls in love with her from a distance. So it's kind of got its love story going on in there as well, but it's an action comedy. Again, the chemistry between Richard Dreyfuss and Emilio Estevez is on another level. Fantastic chemistry between these two. It's a really fun and entertaining film, and it led to a sequel, which wasn't as good, but still was entertaining in its own right. Coming in at number 2, Midnight Run. Robert De Niro, Charles Grodin. Charles Grodin passed away recently, unfortunately. And people have been crying out for a sequel to this film for years. And this was my very first Robert De Niro film when I was a youngster in the 80s. I hadn't seen any of his other films. This was my first Robert De Niro film, and what a film it is. He plays a bounty hunter tasked with going cross-country with Charles Grodin, who has got a bounty on his head, basically, but everybody's after him. The FBI, the mob, and Robert De Niro has got his hands full getting him from one end of the country to the other in one piece. It's funny, great action, and again, I'm saying it again, incredible chemistry between the leads. But number one, it has to be. It's the one that sparked this idea in the first place. It's a film that a lot of you guys will have seen, but if you were honest with yourselves, if people said to you, what's your favourite film from the 80s, name me 10 films from the 80s that are your favourites, it probably wouldn't make your top 10 list because you'd list some of these other more conventional ones. But when someone says to you, have you seen The Hitcher from the 80s, you're like, oh, what a film that is, an absolutely incredible film, and it just is. It's endlessly watchable. I've just rewatched it and reviewed it for the channel and absolutely loved it. Rutger Hauer is immense in it. It's a fantastic story, and for me, that's why I had to put it at number one on my list. It's just so good. So there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed that list of my top 10 favourite alternative 1980s films. There's probably loads on there that I've missed that you guys can name in the comments. I would love to hear those in the comments. It could even lead in the future to another alternative 1980s films. There's just so many. As I was doing this list, as I was preparing to film, there were more popping in my head, like Romancing the Stone and things like that. You know what I mean? And there's just so many. There's so many horrors as well that, you know, Fright Nights and things like that that will be in your minds, but the person on the street, when you ask them what their favourite 80s films are, they don't often mention these sort of films. So really enjoyed doing this list. If there's any films on this list that you guys haven't seen, trust me, if you watch them, you'll like them because they're absolutely brilliant and they're absolute classic 1980s films. And many of them on this list, I think, maybe with the exception of one or two, I have reviewed on the channel as well if you want to see a more extensive review on any of the ones I've mentioned. So thank you very much for watching, guys. Keep your eye out for a lot more top 10 lists in the coming weeks. I really enjoy doing them, even though they don't typically do brilliantly well in regards to views. Please, guys, if you enjoy these top 10 videos, don't forget to like the videos, share them as well. Let's spread them out so other people can see them, because I really do enjoy doing the top 10 lists. So thank you very much for your support, everybody. I will be back with loads more content on the channel very, very soon.